The hum of energy systems filled the air aboard Orion Prime as the representatives of countless species gathered for the Galactic Council session. Their thoughts weighed heavily with the gravity of the occasion today. The humans were arriving for the first time to present their case, and everyone knew this would be no ordinary meeting. They had watched humanity grow from the first clumsy steps into space to the formation of colonies spread across a handful of systems. Humanity was a young species, but undeniably resilient, and driven. The question was whether that would be enough to earn them a seat at the table of galactic powers. The chamber was vast, stretching like an ancient amphitheater surrounded by towering holographic screens, and alien architecture. Representative from over 50 species sat in their places, some indifferent, some curious, and others bristling with skepticism. Each race had its own agenda. The Frictions wanted to expand their borders, the Kratha were eager for more trade routes, and the Hlicks considered the humans a nuisance at best. When the doors opened and the human delegation entered, there was a moment of stunned silence. The humans were led by President Eleanor Harrow, a woman of average height, but her presence filled the room. She had an air of calm authority around her that contrasted with the nervous tension her people felt. The humans were not known for their diplomacy, but for their relentless survival instincts, their ability to endure against odds that would break any other species. The entire delegation was dressed in simple but sharp uniforms, their eyes focused forward, every step measured and deliberate. Once the delegation reached the center of the chamber, President Harrow stepped forward. She held her gaze steady as it swept across the faces of the council, the alien leaders who had seen empires rise and fall, civilizations that had lived for millennia. And yet this human stood unshaken in the presence of those who considered themselves the pinnacle of existence. She spoke, her voice cutting through the silence, her words clear and unyielding. We humans have fought for every inch of our existence. From the moment we first left our homeworld, we have faced challenges no other species would dare to endure. Yet here, we stand on the edge of a new era. It is time for humanity to be recognized for what we truly are, and we will no longer accept second-class status in this council. We demand full rights, equal standing, and a voice in every decision that affects us. The chamber erupted into a flurry of murmurs. A ripple of disbelief echoed across the room. Some species turned to each other, exchanging looks. Others chuckled in disbelief. The Hlicks representative, an enormous being covered in iridescent scales, bellowed with laughter. What arrogance, he muttered. Humans are hardly worthy of such demands. Another voice rose from the Catherine ambassador, who glared down at the humans with disdain. The gall of this species is beyond comprehension. President Harrow did not flinch. She remained standing before the council, her eyes unwavering, as if daring them to dismiss her. She was met with a cold silence that felt heavier than any outburst. The council members exchanged glances and began a murmur of private consultations. The fate of humanity's future hung in the balance. As the vote was called and the decision made, no humanity would not be granted a seat at the table. As the rejection was announced, the human delegation turned to leave, but there was a fire in their eyes, a resolve that had not been there before. President Harrow spoke once more, but her voice was low, and for the first time there was a hint of a smile. We will not be ignored. The cold silence that followed the vote felt like a physical blow as the doors of the council chamber slid shut behind the human delegation. Their rejection was final and absolute. No words of consolation came from the council members, no acknowledgement of the effort humanity had put forth in seeking a place among the stars. As equals, the decision was made with the same casual indifference that one might give to the rise and fall of empires, too insignificant to matter. Humanity's request was swept away with little more than a flick of the wrist. As the delegation returned to their ships, the weight of the council's decision was felt in the hearts of every human who had dared to believe that their struggle for recognition would be rewarded. But there was no bitterness in President Eleanor Harrow's eyes, only an unwavering resolve. She stood at the head of the delegation as they prepared to depart Orion Prime, her mind already racing with the consequences of this rejection. She would not bow to the arrogance of a council that considered their species too young to hold any real power. Humans had fought their way to this point with every fiber of their being, and they would not be denied again. On Earth, And in the colonies, the news of the Council's rejection spread quickly. The shock was felt across the human world, like a ripple in water from the bustling cities of Earth to the remote outposts on distant moons. Every human who had been watching the proceedings saw it as a slap in the face, as an insult to their very existence. They had hoped for diplomacy, but now they were being told once again that they were nothing more than an emerging species struggling to find its place in a universe dominated by older, more established civilizations. The reaction was swift, and visceral protests erupted across human colonies, some violent, others merely loud, but all of them united by a single sentiment: humanity had been wronged, and humanity would not tolerate it. In the crowded streets of New York, in the orbiting stations above Mars, in the mining colonies of Titan, angry crowds gathered, chanting for justice, demanding recognition. Even the military began to feel the weight of the decision. Their commanders knew that Earth's military might was not enough to deter the Council's forces, but the resolve among the human ranks was growing stronger with each passing hour. President Harrow understood the implications of what had just happened better than anyone. She knew the Council's rejection was not just an affront to their pride. It was a declaration that humanity would remain nothing more than pawns in a game played by galactic powers far beyond their reach. But Harrow also understood something else. The Council had made a grave mistake in underestimating humanity's determination. Humans were not a species that knelt when faced with adversity. They rose and fought harder. Within hours of the Council's vote, Harrow called an emergency session of the global leaders, a gathering of the most influential humans from every colony and every corner of Earth. Her voice was steady, but her words left no room for doubt. "We will not beg for a seat at their table," she said, her eyes sharp and commanding. "We will build our own path, and if they try to stand in our way, we will make them regret it." The world was on the brink of something greater than anyone could have imagined. The rejection was not a defeat, it was the spark that would ignite a revolution. As Earth's greatest minds turned to the future of humanity and their place in the stars, something new began to take shape. Quietly and secretly, the wheels of progress began to turn faster than ever before. Humanity was no longer willing to wait for the Council to grant them permission. They would take what was rightfully theirs by force, if necessary, and the galaxy would learn that a species underestimated by the Council was a species that would never stop fighting. Back on Earth, in a secure underground facility, hidden from the watchful eyes of the Galactic Council, Dr. Nira Solis stood over the latest prototype of the stellar drive, a glowing core of energy that pulsed with a quiet, almost hypnotic rhythm. This project had been humanity's greatest secret, a leap in technology that could potentially shift the balance of power across the galaxy. For years, Dr. Solis and her team had worked tirelessly, unaware of how urgently this technology would soon be needed. But now, in the wake of the Council's rejection, the weight of their discovery had never been clearer. The stellar drive wasn't just a new engine. It was the key to humanity's survival and ascension. President Eleanor Harrow stood beside Dr. Solis, her arms crossed as she looked at the core. The hum of the lab's quiet machinery seemed to match the intense thoughts racing through her mind. "Is it ready?" Harrow asked, her voice calm but resolute. She already knew the answer. "It's stable," Dr. Solis replied, her tone a mix of pride and caution. "It's more than we imagined. This is the breakthrough we've been waiting for. The stellar drive can allow us to reach beyond our current capabilities, to travel faster, farther, and without relying on the same limitations as conventional space travel." The project had begun as a dream, a distant idea of pushing the boundaries of human exploration. No one had truly believed that a species so young could master something so monumental. But humans were stubborn creatures, and in their determination, they had unlocked the secret to bending space itself. The stellar drive would allow ships to travel at velocities far exceeding any known technology, even those of the ancient and powerful races in the Galactic Council. With it, humans could outrun their enemies, bypass borders, and strike swiftly before anyone even had a chance to react. It was an equalizer, one that would force the galaxy to acknowledge their might, whether the Council approved or not. General Marcus Trent, Harrow's trusted military advisor, entered the lab, his face grim yet focused. "The fleet is ready," he said, his voice low but carrying a note of quiet excitement. "We have enough ships equipped with the stellar drive for a test run. If we're going to make a statement, we need to move now." Harrow turned her gaze back to Dr. Solace. "We need to be strategic. This isn't about brute force yet. We need to show the galaxy we can defend ourselves, but we can't afford to alienate all potential allies before we're ready. The Shaler will be key. They're pragmatic, and they're already skeptical of the Council's policies." Dr. Solace nodded thoughtfully. "The Shaler may be hesitant, but they're known for their neutrality. If we can get them on our side, they could tip the balance in our favor." The plan was taking shape swiftly. Harrow and Trent had worked together for months to ensure that humanity's fleet would not only be technologically superior, but also tactically superior. They would make their first move carefully. The stellar drive would give them the element of surprise, speed, precision, and the ability to strike first, before anyone could respond. Across the galaxy, in the far reaches of the human colonies, preparations were underway. Every colony, from the mineral-rich moons of Mars to the newly established outposts near Alpha Centauri, had begun assembling ships. The Earth government had authorized the construction of a fleet capable of operating independently, outside of the Council's control. Harrow had already begun forging covert alliances with fringe species and independent colonies that resented the Council's tightening grip on galactic affairs. As the weeks passed, a quiet confidence spread throughout the human ranks. They no longer waited to be recognized. They were taking what they had earned, and they would defend it at all costs. The Galactic Council had miscalculated humanity's resolve, and soon they would understand just how wrong they were. Humanity was no longer merely a participant in the galaxy's great game. They were a player, and they had a weapon that would change the rules forever. The war for the future of the galaxy was about to begin, and humanity was ready to lead it. The tension in the galaxy had been building steadily for weeks, but when the Galactic Council learned of humanity's hidden weapon, the stellar drive, their fear turned to panic. The announcement came swiftly, broadcast across the Council's secure channels to every member species. Humanity had developed a technology that could reshape the power dynamics of the entire galaxy, and the Council was not prepared for it. The reactions were swift and harsh. Earth's actions could not go unpunished. The Council issued an ultimatum: dismantle the Stellar Drive project, or face severe consequences. The terms were clear and non-negotiable. The Shaler were among the first to speak up, warning that the humans were meddling with forces beyond their comprehension. The Vrixians and Kratha were more direct. Military action was inevitable if Earth refused to comply. The Licks, who had long viewed humanity as a nuisance, saw this as an opportunity to further their own agenda, proposing a complete blockade of Earth and its colonies, sealing off any escape routes to make an example of humanity's defiance. President Harrow, standing before her advisors in a secure command room on Earth, did not flinch. The ultimatum from the Council was met with the coldest of silence. Harrow's mind was already racing. There was no turning back now. "We won't dismantle a single ship," she said firmly, her voice unwavering. "We're not going to beg for their mercy. We've built this for our future, and they'll either accept our place in the galaxy or they'll face the consequences." General Trent, standing beside her, nodded in agreement. The humans had been cornered and pushed to the brink, but now they had the means to turn the tide. "We're not going to wait for their fleets to arrive. We strike first," he declared. "We have the element of surprise, and we'll use it." The decision was made, and within hours, the first human operation was set into motion. A fleet of stealth ships, equipped with the newly perfected stellar drives, launched from Earth's orbit and slipped into the heart of Council space. The target was a convoy carrying precious supplies to a distant Vrixian colony, a mission that would cripple their ability to retaliate if war broke out. The strike was quick, surgical, and devastating. The Council's response was immediate, but the humans were already gone, faster than any fleet could react. Across the galaxy, the Council was thrown into turmoil. The news of the first attack hit like a shockwave. Some species were outraged, calling for an immediate military response. The Sheller, however, found themselves in a precarious position. Though they had always prided themselves on neutrality, they could no longer ignore the reality of humanity's power. They offered to mediate, but the Phyrexians and Kratha were unmoved. The Council began to fracture, and factions formed, each with their own vision for how to handle the situation. Back on Earth, President Harrow addressed the global population. Her speech was broadcast across every screen in the colonies and homeworld alike, and her words struck a chord with every human who watched. "We've made our stand," she said, her eyes burning with determination. The Galactic Council wanted to treat us as children, to ignore us, to control us. Now they will learn that humanity is no longer a race to be dismissed. We will fight for our place in this galaxy, and we will not back down. As she spoke, fleets of human ships, now empowered by the stellar drive, began to move in strategic formation, positioned to defend Earth and its colonies. The galaxy was changing before the Council's eyes, and the shift in power was irreversible. Humanity had set the stage for a new kind of war, a war not for survival, but for supremacy. The Council would either bend or break beneath the weight of humanity's growing might. The first battle was over, but the real conflict was just beginning. A conflict that would reshape the galaxy, one where humanity would no longer be a subordinate species, but a force to be reckoned with. The Council had awakened the sleeping giant, and now it would pay the price for underestimating the power of human resolve. The early skirmishes, swift and precise, had sent ripples through the galaxy. Humanity's military capabilities were now undeniable. The stellar drive, a marvel of technology, allowed human ships to move with unmatched speed, striking deep into Council-controlled space before anyone could even prepare a defense. The first attacks had been tactical, designed not to cripple, but to show that humanity's fleet could strike anywhere and at any time, leaving the Council scrambling to respond. In the vast corridors of power on Orion Prime, the Galactic Council was in disarray. The Phyrexians were demanding an immediate counterattack, their voices rising in indignation at what they considered a direct assault on their sovereignty. The Kratha, though equally enraged, were more pragmatic. They suggested a blockade, hoping to starve humanity into submission. But others, like the Sheller, remained cautious. They had seen humanity's potential, and for once, the neutral species were starting to reconsider their long-held stance. As the Council debated, far from the prying eyes of their leaders, humanity's influence was quietly spreading across the galaxy. The colonies, once fractured and disorganized, had begun to unite under Harrow's leadership. The human alliances, fueled by shared ambition and the sheer will to survive, formed an unbreakable bond. The humans were no longer a scattered collection of systems. They were a rising force, and they were building a military presence that could rival the Council's most formidable fleets. The whispers of discontent within the Council grew louder. Some species had begun to question whether they should continue supporting a Council that had failed to acknowledge humanity's strength. On the outer edges of known space, the stellar drive's influence reached far and wide, allowing human ships to forge alliances with alien races who had been long ignored by the Council. Humanity's calls for freedom, independence, and recognition resonated with species that had once been silenced or oppressed by the Council's policies. One of the first to offer support was the Eteri, a race of bioluminescent beings who had once been enslaved by the Phyrexians, but had managed to escape during an uprising. The Geri, who had once lived in the shadows of galactic power, saw in humanity a kindred spirit. They offered their intelligence networks, their ships, and their expertise in navigating Council bureaucracy. They had once fought for their freedom, and now they saw in humanity the same fire that had once burned within them. The human fleet, with its newly bolstered ranks, began to focus on more strategic operations. They struck at Council supply lines, disrupted communication channels, and slowly started to chip away at the Council's once impenetrable control. human military commanders, now experienced in the art of quick, decisive strikes, pushed further into the heart of Council space. The stellar drive gave them the element of surprise, allowing them to strike without warning, vanish without a trace, and then reappear in new locations with devastating force. Meanwhile, Harrow, ever the calculating leader, began to push for a more direct approach. She knew that the longer the war dragged on, the more the galaxy would fracture. Her vision was clear. Humanity had to not only win this conflict, but it had to reshape the balance of power completely. The Council's failure to recognize humanity's strength had opened the door, and Harrow intended to walk through it. At the same time, back on Earth, morale among humans had never been higher. The rebellion, once a small and isolated group, had grown into a massive, unified front. Earth's military forces, bolstered by the vast resources of the colonies, now stood as an undeniable power. The people of Earth saw their struggle as one of self-determination, not just against the Council, but against all who would seek to limit humanity's potential. The once fragmented human colonies were now united by a common cause. They were no longer merely fighting for recognition. They were fighting for their place as equals in a galaxy that had tried to push them to the margins. The war for humanity's future was no longer a matter of survival. It had become a matter of destiny. Humanity had found its strength, and it would not back down. The Council would soon realize that their greatest mistake had been in dismissing a species that had only just begun to show its true power. As the first human victories began to spread across the stars, the galaxy trembled. The old order was crumbling, and humanity was at the center of it all. The Council's grip was loosening, and soon they would have to face a new reality. One where humanity would no longer ask for permission to exist. They would take their place, by force if necessary. The days following humanity's first victories felt like a new dawn had broken across the galaxy. The Galactic Council's once dominant rule was now being questioned, and the question was no longer whether humanity could survive. It was whether the Council could adapt to the rapid rise of this young, aggressive species. Across the far reaches of Council space, humanity's influence was growing. Formerly neutral systems and oppressed races were flocking to humanity's cause, eager to escape the old order that had long confined them. In the depths of Council-controlled space, the first signs of dissent began to show. Several smaller species, previously bound by treaties to support the Council, quietly withdrew their allegiance, silently aligning with humanity. The Terri had been the first to break ranks, but now even more species, including the Warathians and the Mire, were whispering about the imbalance in the galaxy. The Council had maintained a stranglehold over these worlds for millennia, but now they saw a new opportunity for freedom under humanity's banner. The Vrixians, furious at the continued human encroachments, called for retaliation. Their fleets, large and formidable, began to mass near the border of Council space, preparing for what they believed would be the ultimate confrontation. Their strategy was simple: strike quickly and decisively, eliminating the human fleet before it could gain any further strength. They underestimated how quickly humanity could mobilize. As the Vrixians prepared their assault, President Eleanor Harrow called for a meeting with her senior advisors, including General Trent, Dr. Solace, and representatives from the new allies they had gathered. The time for defensive strikes was over. The Vrixians were planning a major offensive, and Harrow knew that humanity's only option was to take the fight to them. "We've gained ground, but now we need to keep the momentum," Harrow said, her tone sharp and clear. "The Vrixians think they can intimidate us into submission, but we've proven we won't back down. It's time we push into their territory. If we can cripple their military bases and disrupt their command centers, we can take away their ability to strike back." General Trent nodded. He had seen firsthand what humanity's fleet was capable of. The stellar drive had made them faster, more agile, and more deadly than the Vrixians could have predicted. "We have the technology, and we've already proven our resolve. We need to strike fast and hard. I'm confident that with our new allies, we can hit their supply lines, and destabilize their operations before they can retaliate. Dr. Solace added her insight, a glint of excitement in her eyes. The stellar drive isn't just a weapon. It's a tool of disruption. Our ships can move in and out of enemy territory before they even know what's happening. The Vryxians will be fighting blind. Harrow stood, looking out over the holomap of the galaxy displayed in front of them. Then we move, and we move now. Every ship, every fleet, must be ready. We strike before they can organize their forces. Let's show them that humanity doesn't just survive, it conquers. The decision was made, and within hours, the fleet began its journey toward the Vryxian homeworld. The stakes were high. The Vryxians were not a species to be underestimated, but the human resolve had hardened, and their military strength was more unified than ever. With the support of their growing allies, they were ready to push beyond what was previously thought possible. The Vryxians, sensing something amiss, scrambled to defend their territories. But by the time they realized the full extent of humanity's approach, it was too late. The human fleet, with the speed and precision of their stellar drive-powered ships, appeared in their space, striking at their military hubs and key infrastructure before the Vryxians could even respond. The attacks were relentless, swift, and overwhelming. The Vryxian fleets, despite their size and power, were no match for the speed with which humanity moved. The battle was short, brutal, and decisive. The Vryxians, once proud and untouchable, had been caught off guard, their forces scattered and crippled by the precision of the human assault. The galactic balance had shifted yet again, and this time, the implications were clear. Humanity was no longer just a player in the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with. The Galactic Council could no longer ignore them, and the days of unchecked dominance were over. In the aftermath of the attack, Harrow stood in the war room, watching as the reports filtered in. The Vryxians had suffered a crushing blow, and their morale was shattered. "We've done it," Trent said, his voice filled with satisfaction. But Harrow remained focused. This is just the beginning. The galaxy is changing, and humanity will lead it. We've proven we are not to be underestimated. The Council will either accept our place, or will make them wish they had. The galaxy had been forever changed. Humanity had turned the tide. Now, it was up to them to decide how far they would go to secure their place among the stars. The victory over the Vryxian forces was not just a tactical success. It was a declaration that humanity would no longer be a subordinate species in the galaxy. The reverberations of that moment were felt across the stars. The Galactic Council, for the first time in centuries, was shaken to its very core. Species that had once stood united under its banner now questioned its leadership, its ability to govern, and its capacity to deal with this new, unpredictable player on the galactic stage. As word spread of humanity's success, more and more systems began to voice their dissatisfaction with the Council. The once unshakable foundation of the galactic order began to crack, and fractures formed between the once solid alliances. The Shaler, ever the neutral party, were now uncertain of their position. Though they had tried to keep their distance from the brewing conflict, the reality was clear. They could no longer afford to ignore the rising tide of change. They began to consider whether siding with humanity was a more favorable option than staying aligned with the crumbling Council. President Eleanor Harrow watched from Earth's war room as the messages flooded in. Some were from her allies, eager to join the growing coalition. Others came from species still loyal to the Council, but now questioning the direction of the galactic leadership. "They thought they could silence us," Harrow said, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy before her. "But now, they're the ones on the defensive." General Marcus Trent, standing beside her, nodded grimly. They've underestimated humanity's resolve. The Vryxians learned it the hard way. But it's only the beginning. The Council won't give up easily. Harrow's eyes narrowed, a plan already forming in her mind. We can't stop now. The longer we wait, the more time the Council has to regroup. We have to deal with them while they're weak. While the Council scrambled to organize a counteroffensive, the first cracks appeared within their leadership. Some factions within the council began calling for a ceasefire and negotiations, proposing a peace treaty with humanity. These calls were met with fury by the Phyrexians and the Kratha, who were still reeling from their defeats. The internal strife within the council reached a boiling point when an assassination attempt on a high-ranking council member, believed to be orchestrated by a faction sympathetic to humanity, further fueled the chaos. In the aftermath of the attack, the council convened in an emergency session, but it was clear that they were no longer a unified force. Some species, led by the Shaler, began privately reaching out to Harrow, seeking a path forward that didn't involve further bloodshed. They recognized that humanity had proven itself capable of holding its own, and they saw the growing unrest within the council as an opportunity to shift the balance of power in their favor. Humanity, meanwhile, was preparing for what would be the final push. With their military forces now better organized and their allies more confident in their strength, Harrow and Trent made the decision to strike directly at the heart of the Council's leadership. They would launch a series of coordinated attacks on Council strongholds, including their most important communication hubs and their central command fleets. The goal was simple: cripple their ability to respond and make them realize that humanity was no longer just a nuisance to be dealt with. The first of these attacks would target the heart of the Council's communications network, located on the moon of Altheris. If successful, it would cripple the Council's ability to coordinate their fleets and maintain control over the galaxy. Harrow knew that the moment they struck, there would be no turning back. This would be an all-out war, but it was one humanity was ready to fight. As the fleet prepared for the assault, Harrow addressed the soldiers and commanders over the comms. This isn't just about us. It's about every species that's ever been silenced by the Council, every race that's been oppressed for their own gain. We are fighting for the future of the galaxy, and we will not stop until we are at the table, as equals. With that, the human fleet, now bolstered by allies from across the galaxy, moved into position. The attack on Altheris was imminent, and with it, the fate of the galaxy would be decided. Would the Council be able to regroup, or would humanity's fire burn too bright for the old order to withstand? The galaxy, once ruled by an impenetrable council of old powers, was on the brink of transformation. A new era was beginning, one where humanity would no longer wait to be given a place among the stars. They would carve out their own path, and the Council would be forced to either accept it or watch as they were left in the wake of humanity's rise. The strike on Altheris came swiftly and decisively. Humanity's fleet, bolstered by their growing coalition of allies, descended upon the moon's heavily fortified network with the precision of a well-oiled machine. The stellar drive allowed the humans to strike fast, slipping through defenses before the Council could react. Within hours, the communication hub was neutralized, severing the Council's ability to coordinate their military forces across vast distances. Altheris, once the nerve center of the Galactic Council's power, was now a silent graveyard for its once unstoppable infrastructure. The ramifications were immediate and far-reaching. The Council, in its fragmented state, scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The loss of Altheris had shattered their ability to communicate effectively. Ships, once able to respond to any threat within moments, were now left isolated and disoriented. The Phyrexians, the Kratha, and the remaining Council loyalists found themselves fighting against not only humanity's fleet, but against the growing resentment of species that had long felt oppressed. In the wake of the attack, Harrow stood before her fleet, her heart resolute. The battle for control of the galaxy was no longer about mere survival. It was about creating a new order, one that would no longer be dominated by the old power structures. The Galactic Council had failed in their arrogance and in their belief that humanity could be controlled. They had underestimated the one thing that no fleet, no alliance, and no strategy could ever defeat: the unyielding will of humanity. Today, we've taken the final step toward our destiny, Harrow said, her voice strong, resonating across every ship. We've shown the galaxy what happens when you push humanity into a corner. We're not just here to survive. We're here to lead, to reshape the future for all of us. We've proven that power isn't given, it's earned. The message was clear, and it resonated deeply with the countless species who had long watched the Council's abuses from the sidelines. No longer would they be forced to live under the heavy boot of an oppressive regime. No longer would their voices be drowned out by the interests of the few. Humanity had not only broken the chains of their own subjugation, they had extended their hand to the countless others who longed for the same freedom. As the human fleet began to rally around the newly emerging coalition, a meeting was called in orbit around Earth. Representatives from the Eteri, the Rorathians, and the Shaler joined the humans, signaling a turning point in galactic diplomacy. No longer was the Galactic Council the unquestioned authority. Now, a new council was being formed, one that would be built on equality, respect, and mutual cooperation. The humans, though wary of trusting the old power structures, knew that they would need to strike a delicate balance to maintain this fragile coalition. The council, now shattered and desperate, was left with little choice. They could either fight to maintain their broken hold over the galaxy or agree to a new arrangement. The leaders of the Vrixians and Kratha, while still angry and unwilling to let go of their old ways, were beginning to realize that the galaxy had irrevocably changed. The old order was crumbling before their eyes, and humanity's rise was unstoppable. In a rare emergency session, the remnants of the Galactic Council convened, each faction on edge, uncertain of the future. The galaxy, once governed by their whims, was slipping out of their control. The question was no longer about defeating humanity. It was about surviving in a universe where humanity would no longer be ignored or controlled. Humanity had proved its strength, and the Council had to make a choice. They could either accept humanity's new role in galactic governance or face the prospect of total dissolution. Harrow, ever the pragmatist, knew that the coming negotiations would be the final test. The humans had proven themselves capable of incredible strength, but the true challenge would be in forging a new order, a galaxy where cooperation, not domination, would be the rule. "We've won the war," Harrow said quietly to her advisors as the negotiations began. "But the true battle is only just beginning. We've earned our place, but we'll have to work harder than ever to make sure it's one we can sustain. This is our galaxy now, and we will decide its future." The galaxy was on the precipice of a new era. The war had ended, but the journey of rebuilding and reshaping the order of the stars had just begun. Humanity would no longer wait for permission to exist. They would lead, and the galaxy would have no choice but to follow.